What's up, friends? Welcome to Raj's 5-minute reviews, where I try to pack as much information in 5 minutes and essentially provide you everything you need to know to make a decision as to whether you'd watch this show or film or not. Today we'll be reviewing Resident Evil Infinite Darkness. So Resident Evil Infinite Darkness is a new show that just hit Netflix 2021, and as of right now it's a really short show. It has one season with 4 episodes. Each episode's around 25 minutes, and essentially Resident Evil Infinite Darkness follows the plot of Leon and Claire Redfield, both characters from the Resident Evil games, as they work to solve a series of outbreaks that occur, specifically one that occurs in the White House. Zombies invade, and these two characters have to figure out what's happening, why, and how to stop it. So in terms of characters, you're really gonna have to love the Resident Evil series to care about these characters. There is very limited character development. There is barely any background provided for these two characters or any of the other characters in this series altogether. The show really assumes you know what the Resident Evil universe is about, what happens in it, who these two characters are, what happened in events past. And because of that, if you don't have any idea of any of those, or if you don't research it beforehand, you might be lost during a good amount of the show. In addition to that, the personalities of the two characters and all the other characters aren't really engaging or really well developed, so you're not really gonna fall in love with them unless you know about them beforehand. The characters are very much masters, and they're experienced in their craft, and they essentially tend to know everything and consider themselves to be the most experienced, which is fine. But the issue is, in this show, there is no development. These characters don't really evolve. Their relationship together gets strengthened. You know, in the beginning, they don't trust each other. As they grow to face this situation, they develop more and they start to like each other more. But all in all, it's a very loose relationship, and their characters are relatively flimsy altogether. In terms of if it holds your attention, the plot takes place between Resident Evil 4 and 5. So if you've played both of those games, or if you're really into the Resident Evil series, you're going to follow along and be relatively interested, because the plot adds a little bit of background as to what happened between those two games and what's happening to this universe and this world that helps to develop it a little bit further. Now, if you haven't watched any Resident Evil or played any Resident Evil or care about Resident Evil, then none of the things that are going to happen in this show are going to interest you. Almost none. Because it's relatively poorly put together, so it doesn't do a very good job in keeping you engaged throughout all the 4 episodes. And it doesn't really do a good job of explaining the world, the universe, on an understandable level, and more just keeps muddling through to provide more background and depth into what is relatively uninteresting, in my opinion. It has a very weak, thin plot that isn't bolstered by really cool details or really cool scenes or really cool situations. So in that sense, it doesn't do a very good job of retaining and holding your attention altogether. In terms of what's unique about the show, they took a route of this hyper-realistic animation style that kind of reminds me of Call of Duty cutscenes, if you guys have played those, or Battlefield cutscenes. Essentially cutscenes in video games where characters' faces are really well rendered and really crisp, and everything is made to look very realistic. Materials and fabric and fibers and everything's really realistic looking. The part where this show fails, however, is although some scenes are hyper-realistic and look really beautiful, the show will immediately flash to another scene where it literally looks like block characters. It looks like the original Resident Evil 1 and 2 games, but animated into a show. And you'd expect a lot more from a show that in one scene makes crisp, clear, hyper-realistic animation, but somehow they go from that in one scene to very blocky, really horribly rendered characters in another scene, and this dynamic really takes you out of the entire show. It drains all of the value out of the scenes where the animation is so poor, because you're just so focused on how garbage the animation you're watching is, you know. And that's most likely because the studio probably ran out of money animating the really crisp scenes and just had to cobble together the rest of the scenes. I don't know what would cause something like this to happen, but just a fair warning, if you're gonna watch this show, be ready for some scenes where you're gonna be taken way out of it and you're gonna cringe, because it's a little bit difficult to watch. The other sad part is a lot of these scenes that have these horrible animations are the action scenes, the scenes that would draw you into this show in the first place. So because of that, if you really are someone who's picky about their animation, who likes their animation to be really well done, I would definitely not recommend this show because it does not hit the spot. It has a cool Star Wars-esque soundtrack in the background that helps to add some levity and some engagement to the show. So in terms of soundtrack, it's not that bad. It's not fantastic like Hunter x Hunter or any other shows with fantastic soundtracks, but it does a relatively good job of bolstering a super light, thin plot. If you're fans of action zombie outbreak films where teams have to investigate outbreaks and figure out what's causing them and why, and fight essentially this scourge that's happening, then you might like this show. But again, just because of the animation, how it falls flat, plus the thin plot, plus the relatively one-dimensional and uninteresting characters, that combination really draws you away from interest in the show. So even if you are fans of zombie outbreak films and shows, I would urge you to consider Black Summer or Walking Dead instead, because this show doesn't really do that fantastic a job. So all in all, I'll give this show a 1 out of 4, as in not really worth checking out. I would not recommend watching this show. Again, if you are a really diehard fan of the Resident Evil series, I say give it a shot, because why not? Maybe you'll be more interested, and if you do give it a shot, if you do give it a chance and you do like it, please let me know in the comments below, and let me know why you like it. Let me know what drew you in and what interests you about the show. But for me personally, it didn't do its job. Now moving on to the Parents Guide. In terms of action, I give this film a 5 out of 5. There is a lot of action and a surprising amount of gore. It's not as frequent as you'd think it would be, but then again, with the short time span that the show is, it's really only 4 episodes of 24 minutes each. It has a good amount of action, and a lot of it is gore, unnecessarily gory violence. In terms of sexual content, there's really very limited, almost none, maybe 1 sexual reference altogether in the whole show. And then in terms of language, there is a good amount of language. I give this show a 4 out of 5. There's the F word, S word, good amount of swearing, so would not recommend this show for younger audiences. As I mentioned before, I would not recommend this show for anyone altogether. But if you do check out the show, I would not recommend it for younger audiences, just because there is a good amount of gore and language in the show that can be pretty rough for younger audiences.